You're listening to The Jake Asman Show on the SportsMap Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
It was a busy weekend here in Houston. UFC 262 came and went, and we have now a brand new lightweight champion of the world. Charles Oliveira defeated Michael Chandler with a round 2 TKO. It was a very exciting card. And to break it all down and talk all things UFC, we go out to our progressive guest line right now, and we bring on Nolan King, who covers the UFC for MMAJunkie.com. Nolan, appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Jake. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So let's start, of course, with the lightweight championship. What were your big takeaways watching Oliveira defeat Chandler?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is certainly how far Charles Oliveira has come. I know we've seen it gradually over time, him improve, him get his striking down, him secure his first UFC knockout a few fights ago, and then he got another one. But for him to go out there against a guy like Michael Chandler, who's been in the cage with as experienced strikers as they come, and to go out there and finish him, look very good in the second round, be very durable in the first round, which is something that he struggled with early in his career. I think it just showed the progression of the 11 years worth of UFC tape and the tenure that he's had there. Just how far he's come, man. It was incredible performance.
Were you surprised that Chandler, left himself open for those shots? It felt like that first round, it was back and forth, and we were in for a really good fight, and then Oliveira just dominated that second round.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I mean, if you ask me what the most unlikely outcome would be in that fight, I think maybe Charles by knockout would have been my least likely choice going into that fight. But it shows you, man, that this sport is unlike any others. You can be down 100, you can be up 100. It doesn't matter. All you have to do is just go out there and land the right shots, and that's what Charles did. That first round was phenomenal. Momentum shifts back and forth. I mean, the first half, I think everybody was like, oh, man, Charles was going to sub him. Then the second half of the first round, it was like, man, Chandler's got his number. But for him to flip that switch in the second round and switch the momentum and flip it on Chandler was just it was incredible, man. 19 seconds, I think, into the second.
Tony Ferguson lost his third straight fight that we watched him participate in the co-main, Nolan. What comes next for Tony Ferguson, and how much of his losses in his last three just has to do with the fact that he's 37 years old?
I think that's it, right? And I think you hit the nail on the head. And he was on that great winning streak, but also he was fighting, so infrequently throughout it, and the fact that Father Time is undefeated. And so I think it's unfortunate that we had to pass over the Khabib fight due to injuries and whatever else was going on. And I think we really lost the prime Tony Ferguson somewhere in there without knowing it. As for what's next, I mean, I'm sure that the UFC, after the crowd reception that Tony got last week, clearly the bop on the entire card, I think that they're certainly going to keep him around. As for where he goes from here, that's a different story. I mean, he's lost essentially every single round in the last three fights that he's partaken in. And yeah, I mean, they're going to have to give him a step back, maybe a veteran, somebody that's maybe not even in the rankings, because I think Tony's momentum right now is come to a complete halt.
Nolan King joining us here, covers UFC for MMAJunkie.com. He's joining us on our progressive guest line. Nolan, I'm curious, what were your thoughts on Tony Ferguson's comments that Michael Chandler has Dana White privilege?
Oh, it cracked me up. It was funny, too, because listening to it, everybody laughed, and I was like, oh, that was a good line. And I think it took me a few times to actually get it, which was then I was like, oh man, he really hit that out of the park. Like if that was something that he came up with on the spot, that was just absolutely genius. And yeah, I thought it was clever. It was funny. I think it was a good way to sum it up. Like, somebody that's popular like Chandler kind of coming in and getting an opportunity perhaps over somebody else that has been at the top of the division for a while. I thought it was very funny by Tony, and it was good to see Dana appreciate it too. He didn't take it too much to heart.
It's funny because I asked him about it, and he said it was hilarious. He enjoyed it. He loved the line.
Right? Yeah, that's the funniest part to me. Like I would expect him to, not play into it as much, but I guess you have to have a sense of humor when you're up there, and good on Dana for that one.
As far as some of the other news from over the weekend, of course, people want to know, what's going to happen with the heavyweight division at UFC. Everyone wants to know, is Jon Jones going to move up in weight, or are we going to get that fight against, Francis Ngannou and Jones? And Dana White told us on the show on Friday, basically, if Jon Jones, doesn't want to fight at heavyweight, we're just going to move on and we're going to make a different fight. The winner of, Ngannou and Lewis will basically get Stipe again. Is that where we're headed here? Or do you think Dana's maybe just putting that out there to try and motivate Jones to get a deal done?
I think the Ngannou-Lewis fight is a definite, I think that's almost finalized. I think we'll see that in August, maybe on the pay-per-view with Amanda Nunes and Juliana Pena, I think August 7th. As for his comment, Stipe, that to me seems a little bit more of I don't want to say a poke at Jones, but maybe trying to get him to, lure him in and say, hey, if you keep turning down these fights, you're going to keep moving further and further away from the first fight we offered you, which was a title shot that you said no to. So I think that's a little bit of a negotiating tool. I think if Jon woke up today and said, you know what, I'm going to take that Stipe fight, I don't think Dana would think twice about kind of going back on his word when it came to Stipe having definitely having the next shot. So I think that it is a little bit of a negotiating tool, but the Ngannou-Lewis fight is pretty much a done deal at this point.
If Jones doesn't move up to heavyweight and he stays at light heavyweight, when would we see him fight again? I mean, he has not fought since he was actually here in Houston over a year ago in February. When would we see Jon Jones again?
I mean, the earliest I'm thinking you would see him would be at October at this point. The UFC's pretty much booking out their September right now, and obviously a fight like Jon Jones' heavyweight debut would want to go on a pay-per-view slot. So I think October would be the earliest, but I'm not optimistic. It doesn't seem like the parties are close to some sort of deal at this point. And who knows? Jon can depends on how long Jon wants to play the waiting game or how long the UFC is comfortable with him sitting on the shelf. But it could be 2022 by the time we see him fight again.
Spending a few minutes here talking all things UFC after UFC 262 this weekend. We're talking with Nolan King. You can find him on Twitter at MMA_Kings. He covers UFC for MMAJunkie.com. Looking ahead now to some of the big fights that are coming in the coming weeks, Nolan, what immediately catches your eye? What should fight fans be excited about?
Yeah, there's a bunch of good fights coming up. I think the main event this weekend with Cody Garbrandt and Rob Font. Garbrandt's got a little bit of a name. Font, maybe to the casual listeners, is not somebody they're familiar with, but a very pivotal bantamweight fight there nonetheless. And, UFC 263, the pay-per-view up here in June, is phenomenal. I mean, it's got 3 5-round fights, Adesanya, Vettori, Figueiredo, Moreno, and the return of Nate Diaz against Leon Edwards. So that's one, I think the mainstream people that maybe just watch a couple pay-per-views a year, that's one of your cards that you should tune in for. And then, of course, in July, we have Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 3. And who is not excited for that fight to see them run it back and break the tiebreaker here?
Obviously, everyone will be watching McGregor. What happens if he doesn't win, though, Nolan? I mean, that would be 3 straight losses to of course, Poirier here. How significant is this fight? And how important would it be for Conor to go out there and win this fight in July?
I think it's huge for him. I think, after seeing him get knocked out in that last fight, I think he took a big blow in terms of the amount of interest that he has. And sure, he's still the most popular figure in MMA. People, if he lost his next 5 fights in a row, people would tune in to see him fight. But I think there's something to be said about erasing people's memory in this sport. And it's not that hard to do. I mean, all you need to do is do something good and people forget about the bad. It's what have you done for me lately sport. So if Conor McGregor goes out there and he beats Dustin Poirier, I think it will have a similar effect for his career as when he rematched Nate Diaz and beat him. People will think, kind of erase the thought of him getting knocked out in that second fight and say, okay, he went out there, he broke the tie, he has 2 wins against Dustin, Dusty's better. And who knows? I mean, the UFC could throw him in a title fight after that, and he could be looking at, fighting Charles Oliveira, which is not the worst matchup in the world for him stylistically. So, it'll be interesting, man. It's a big one for Conor for sure. And, but I don't know. I'm very excited for it.
Absolutely. Nolan King with us here. Looking at some of these celebrity boxing fights, Nolan, I'm curious as someone that covers MMA for a living, what's your take on, these celebrity fights? Do you think they're good or bad for combat sports overall?
I actually think they're good, and it's funny. I get a lot of flack for that. We do for covering it. And I get it. I mean, I'm a hardcore fan at heart. If I went to MMA Junkie, maybe seeing somebody that didn't necessarily earn it the traditional way, getting on the website could be frustrating. But to me, I mean, it brings a lot of eyeballs into this sport that wouldn't, into combat sports that wouldn't usually be interested. I don't think necessarily taking away opportunities from up-and-comers or replacing some good sort of boxing or combat sports content. I think it's an addition. I think these people that are tuning in for this wouldn't be watching boxing on that Saturday or Friday night. They would be doing something else or watching something else. So I personally think it's great for combat sports. I think the more money that comes in certainly can't help. I mean, we've seen some legitimate boxers fight on the undercard of these Jake Paul fights. And so for me, I'm fine with it. I get why people don't like it, but it's just in the realm of things, the more money in combat sports, the better.
Totally agree. Nolan King on Twitter at MMA_Kings. Check him out. Reporter for USA Today's MMA Junkie. Nolan, appreciate you getting up early. Thanks for coming on the show, and wish you continued success. Looking forward to following everything you guys have going on at MMAJunkie.com.
Likewise, Jake. I appreciate the time, man, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Nolan King joining us there on our progressive guest line. Interesting stuff from him about the latest with Jon Jones, and when we actually see Jon Jones fight, if he doesn't take a fight at heavyweight in the near future. Coming up next, we'll wrap up hour 1 of 2. Plenty still to hit on in what was a very busy weekend in the sports world. We're coming right back. Jake Asman with you. This is the Jake Asman Show here on Sports Map Radio.
Hey, sports fans. Jake Asman of Sports Map